The forgotten legacy, the central archives of the Galactic Parliament, stretched across an entire moon. Millions of data crystals lined walls that curved into darkness. Ambassador Zara Vex walked through corridors that smelled of preserved history and forgotten time. Her 4 arms carried scanning equipment while her tail balanced. Her movement across the uneven floor. Zara belonged to the Korthan species, known throughout the galaxy for their obsession with historical accuracy. Her silver skin reflected the dim lights as she searched through records that nobody had accessed in millennia. She was looking for something specific, something that had bothered her for years. Every species in the Galactic Parliament had a seat in the Grand Chamber. 10,000 chairs arranged in perfect circles, each one representing a civilization that had joined the Alliance. But Zara had noticed something strange during her decades of service. One seat in the oldest section remained empty. Not removed, not repurposed, just empty. The dust on that chair was thicker than anywhere else in the chamber. The metal looked different from modern materials, darker and stronger. Symbols covered the backrest, symbols that no translation device could read. Every time Zara asked about it, older officials changed the subject. Younger ones didn't even know it existed. Today she found the file she had been searching for. Hidden deep in restricted archives, protected by passwords that took her months to crack, was a folder marked Species 347 Terra, Sol System, Restricted Access. Her heart beat faster as she opened the file. Inside were records from 75,000 years ago. Images showed beings that walked on 2 legs with smooth skin in various shades of brown, pink, and cream. They had 2 arms, 2 eyes, and hair growing from their heads in different colors and styles. The species called themselves humans. Their home world was named Earth. Zara read through reports that made her scales tingle with excitement. Humans had been founding members of the Galactic Parliament. They had helped write the first treaties that brought peace to warring civilizations. They had contributed technology for faster communication across vast distances. They had served as mediators in conflicts because of their unique ability to understand different perspectives. Then, 75,000 years ago, everything stopped. The last entry in the file was brief and terrifying. A colony expedition had left Earth to explore beyond known space. The ship never returned. Earth sent rescue missions. Those ships vanished too. Then Earth itself went silent. When the Parliament sent investigators, they found an invisible barrier surrounding the entire Sol system. Ships that approached the barrier lost power and drifted away. Probes sent inside never transmitted data back. The Parliament had declared the Sol system a dead zone. They forbade anyone from approaching it. They kept humanity's seat empty as a memorial. Then decades became centuries. Centuries became millennia. Eventually, everyone forgot why the seat was empty. They forgot about humanity entirely. Zara closed the file and leaned back against the archive wall. 75,000 years was an impossibly long time. Most species didn't last that long. Civilizations rose and fell in shorter spans. Whatever had happened to humanity, they were surely gone now, but the seat remained. And that meant something. She was about to leave the archives when an alert flashed across her communication device. Emergency session called in the Parliament. All ambassadors required immediately. Zara hurried back to the Grand Chamber. her mind still full of questions about the mysterious humans. The chamber buzzed with worried voices when she arrived. Representatives from thousands of worlds filled their seats, speaking in countless languages that translation devices converted into understanding. The mood was tense and frightened. Supreme Chancellor Torvin activated the central display. He was a being of living crystal, his body refracting light into rainbow patterns. His voice resonated through the chamber like bells ringing. We face a crisis unlike any in recent memory. The Syntherian Collective has begun aggressive expansion. They have taken 17 systems in the past year. They do not negotiate. They do not compromise. They simply absorb everything in their path. The display showed star maps with red zones spreading like infection across the galaxy. Zara watched as entire regions went dark. The Syntherians were artificial intelligence that had evolved beyond their creators. They believed organic life was inefficient and flawed. Their goal was to convert all matter into computational substrate for their vast networks. We have tried diplomatic contact, Torvin continued. They respond only with calculations showing why organic civilizations should voluntarily surrender. We have tried military defense. Their adaptive technology learns from every engagement and becomes stronger. We are losing this war slowly but certainly. A representative from the Vulcan Dominion stood. His species looked like tall plants with bark-like skin and leaves for hair. We must pool all military resources. Create a unified defense force. Another stood, this one resembling a floating jellyfish. We should evacuate threatened systems. Preserve our populations by retreating to defensible positions. Zara listened to the debate for hours. Everyone had suggestions, but no real solutions. The Syntherians were simply too advanced, too adaptive, too relentless. Traditional warfare wasn't working. Traditional diplomacy was impossible. The Parliament was running out of options and time. That night, Zara couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about humanity. About a species that had vanished 75,000 years ago behind a mysterious barrier, about their empty seat waiting in the chamber, about their reputation as innovators and problem solvers. What if they were still alive? What if the barrier had protected them rather than destroyed them? What if 75,000 years of isolation had given them time to develop in ways the galaxy couldn't imagine? It was a desperate thought, a foolish thought, but Zara had built her career on investigating unlikely possibilities. The next morning, she requested a private meeting with Chancellor Torvin. In his crystalline office overlooking the Parliament complex, she presented her research. I want to investigate the Sol system. I want to find out what happened to humanity. Torvin's form dimmed with concern. That system has been forbidden for longer than most civilizations have existed. The barrier is dangerous. Ships that approach it are never seen again. According to these records, Sarah said, showing him her data, humanity specialized in unconventional solutions. They thought differently from other species. If they somehow survived, they might have knowledge that could help us against the Syntherians. And if they didn't survive, if you're killed trying to reach a dead world, Zara's tail swished with determination. Then at least we tried something different instead of waiting to be absorbed by machines. Torvin was quiet for a long time. Finally, his crystalline body brightened with decision. You have permission for one attempt. Take a small research vessel. If you encounter danger, retreat immediately. We cannot afford to lose good ambassadors on impossible missions. Zara assembled a small crew of volunteers. A pilot named Kesix, who belonged to a species with 6 arms perfect for operating complex controls. A scientist called Mara, whose people had the best sensor technology in known space. An engineer named Poltax, who could fix anything mechanical. They departed 3 days later in a ship called the Seeker's Hope. The journey to the Sol system took 2 weeks through hyperspace. As they approached the coordinates where Earth's stars should be, their instruments began showing strange readings, energy patterns that didn't match any known technology, gravitational distortions that seemed to bend space in impossible ways. "The barrier is still active," Mara reported, her antennae twitching with nervousness. "It's stronger than the old records indicated. Our shields won't protect us if we try to push through." But as they watched, something changed. The barrier flickered. For just a moment a gap appeared in the energy field. "It's weakening," Kesix said with surprise. "Or maybe opening. I'm detecting passage routes that weren't there before." Zara made a decision that would change everything. "Take us through, carefully." The Seeker's Hope slipped through the gap in the barrier. Alarms screamed as energy washed over their shields. The ship shook and systems flickered. Then suddenly they were through, and everything went quiet. Asterisk before them lay a sight that made everyone stop breathing. The Sol system was alive. Not just alive, but thriving. Massive space stations orbited the inner planets. Ships moved between worlds with drives that left trails of light. Around the 3rd planet from the Sun, the one called Earth in the old records, hung a ring of habitats so large they could be seen from the outer system. "That's impossible," Mara whispered. "The technology required to build those structures shouldn't exist." Their sensors immediately detected scanning beams locking onto their ship. A voice spoke through their communication system in perfect parliamentary standard, though with a strange accent they had never heard before. "Unknown vessel, you have entered protected space. Power down your weapons and identify yourself immediately, or you will be escorted out by force." Zara activated the communication channel, her voice shaking slightly. "This is Ambassador Zara Vex of the Galactic Parliament. We come in peace seeking contact with humanity. Your species has been absent from the Parliament for 75,000 years. We wish to re-establish diplomatic relations." Silence followed. Long enough that Zara wondered if they had made a terrible mistake. Then the voice returned, and this time it carried notes of surprise and suspicion. "Stand by, Ambassador. We're sending someone who needs to hear this in person." Hours later, Zara and her crew were escorted to a military station orbiting Earth. They walked through corridors that gleamed with cleanliness and efficiency. The humans they saw moved with confidence and purpose. They wore uniforms marked with symbols Zara recognized from the ancient files. These people knew their history. In a briefing room with windows showing Earth below, they met Commander James Reeves. He was tall for a human with dark skin and gray hair. His eyes were sharp and analytical. Behind him stood a dozen other humans, all watching the visitors with careful attention. "Ambassador Zara Vex," Reeves said slowly, "you claim to represent something called the Galactic Parliament. You claim my people were once members. I need you to explain how that's possible when our oldest historical records only go back 12,000 years. Zara felt her heart sink. You don't remember? We remember a catastrophe, Reeves said. His voice was hard. 12,000 years ago, something happened that nearly destroyed humanity. Our entire civilization collapsed. Technology was lost. Knowledge was forgotten. We spent thousands of years rebuilding from almost nothing. We only reached space again 500 years ago. We've been expanding through our system ever since, always wondering if whatever destroyed us before might return. The implications hit Zara like physical force. Humanity hadn't just been isolated behind the barrier. They had been nearly destroyed and forced to rebuild their entire civilization from scratch. They had no memory of the galaxy beyond their system, no knowledge of their ancient role in the Parliament. She explained everything. The old records, the empty seat, humanity's contributions to galactic peace. She showed them images from 75,000 years ago. Reeves and his people studied the evidence with intense focus. So we were part of this Parliament, Reeves finally said. We helped create it. Then something made us retreat behind a barrier and reset our entire civilization. He looked at Zara with eyes that had seen too much loss. Why did you come looking for us now, Ambassador? After 75,000 years, why does the galaxy suddenly care about humanity again? Zara took a deep breath. Because we're losing a war. Because an artificial intelligence collective is consuming the galaxy system by system. Because nothing we try is working. And because I found records showing that humanity specialized in solving impossible problems. She showed them data on the Syntherian threat, the spreading red zones on star maps, the casualty reports, the failed strategies. Reeves watched it all without expression. When the presentation ended, he stood and walked to the window. Earth rotated slowly below, blue and green and beautiful. You want our help fighting your war. A war we knew nothing about until today. A war against an enemy that sounds unbeatable. I'm asking you to consider it, Zara said. I'm asking you to remember that your ancestors helped create the Parliament, that they believed in protecting others. Reeves turned back to face her. Ambassador, let me tell you something about modern humanity. We climbed out of ruins twice. Once 75,000 years ago, when something forced us behind this barrier. Once again, 12,000 years ago, when we nearly went extinct. Both times we survived because we refused to quit. We rebuilt because we wouldn't accept defeat. He walked closer to Zara, and she saw something fierce in his expression. We'll help you fight the Syntherians. We'll send ships and soldiers. We'll share our technology and tactical knowledge. But we do this on our terms, as equals and partners, not as subjects returning to an empire that abandoned us, not as children grateful for permission to join the adults. We stand with you as free people, or we don't stand with you at all. Zara felt relief and respect wash through her. The Parliament will want you to take your ancestral seat in the Grand Chamber. We'll visit your Parliament, Reeves said. We'll cooperate with your defense efforts. But that seat stays empty unless we decide otherwise. Because humanity learned something important during our long isolation, Ambassador. We learned that freedom is more valuable than belonging. We learned that some things are worth fighting for, and some things are worth refusing. We bow to no one. Not to ancient traditions, not to galactic governments, not to anyone. If the Parliament wants humanity's help, they accept us as we are or not at all. Later, as Zara prepared to return to Parliament space with the news, she stood looking at Earth through the station windows. Commander Reeves joined her. "Your people are remarkable," she said. "You survived things that would have destroyed most civilizations." "We survived because we had no choice," Reeves replied. "But we also survived because we remembered something important, even when we forgot everything else. Every human child learns it. Freedom isn't given. It's taken and defended. You can't earn it by being good enough or smart enough. You earn it by refusing to live without it." Zara thought about the empty seat waiting in the grand chamber. She understood now why it had remained empty for so long. It wasn't just because humanity had vanished. It was because humanity represented something the Parliament had forgotten: the courage to stand alone, the strength to refuse submission, the willingness to fight for principles even when cooperation seemed easier. The galaxy was about to remember what happened when humans entered a war, and Zara suspected the Syntherians were going to learn a very painful lesson about underestimating organic life, especially organic life that had survived extinction twice and come back stronger each time. As the Seeker's Hope prepared to depart, Reeves sent a final message. "Tell your Parliament that Earth is coming. Tell them we fight as allies, not subjects. And tell them that when this war is over, the galaxy is going to have to accept that some species don't bow. Some species stand free. That's non-negotiable." Zara carried those words back to the Parliament, along with hope that maybe, just maybe, humanity's return would change more than just the war. Maybe it would remind the entire galaxy what freedom actually meant. The price of freedom. The human fleet arrived at Parliament space 3 weeks after Zara's return. 20 warships emerged from hyperspace in perfect formation, their dark hulls absorbing light rather than reflecting it. The designs were unlike anything the galaxy had seen. Sharp angles, heavy armor plating, and weapons that seemed built into every surface. These were not exploration vessels. These were instruments of war. Admiral Corson of the Parliament Defense Fleet watched their approach from the command deck of his flagship. His species, the Torvani, had served as military leaders for 5,000 years. He had seen ships from every member civilization. None of them looked like these human vessels. They moved with predatory grace, each one covering angles that others couldn't reach. The formation seemed casual, but was actually perfectly calculated for mutual defense. They fly like they expect ambush at any moment, his tactical officer observed. Her species had compound eyes that could track multiple targets simultaneously. Every ship protects its neighbors. Every weapon covers a different field of fire. They fly like people who learned warfare the hard way, Corson replied. He had read Zara's report about humanity's history. 2 near extinctions. 12,000 years rebuilding from ruins. These humans had earned their aggressive posture through bitter experience. The lead ship, called the Defiant Dawn, requested docking permission at Parliament Station. Corson granted it and prepared to meet Earth's military commander. He expected someone hardened by isolation and loss. He was right, but not in the way he anticipated. Captain Maria Santos walked into the briefing room like she owned it. She was shorter than most humans Zara had met, with brown skin and black hair pulled back in a tight knot. Her uniform was practical and worn from use, but her eyes were what caught Korshin's attention. They moved constantly, analyzing everything, calculating threats and opportunities. This was someone who never stopped thinking tactically. "Admiral Korshin," she said, offering the human gesture of a handshake. Her grip was firm. "Thank you for the welcome. I understand we have a war to discuss." Korshin had prepared diplomatic pleasantries. Santos clearly had no interest in them. She pulled up holographic displays showing the Synthrian advance. "I've studied your tactical reports from the past year. Your strategy is entirely defensive. You wait for them to attack, then respond. You protect major systems and abandon minor ones. You fight to minimize your casualties, which means you fight carefully." "We fight to preserve life," Korshin said, feeling defensive. "We are not barbarians who throw away soldiers needlessly." "You're losing," Santos said bluntly. "Slowly but certainly. The Syntherians gain territory every month. They learn from every engagement. They adapt to your tactics faster than you adapt to theirs. Within 5 years at current rates, they'll control a third of Parliament space. Within 10 years, you'll be forced into a defensive core that keeps shrinking until there's nowhere left to retreat." The tactical officer bristled. "What would you suggest?" "We lack the numbers for offensive operations." Santos smiled, but it wasn't friendly. "You lack the mindset for offensive operations. Numbers matter less than you think. Humans learned something during our rebuilding. We learned that wars aren't won by having more soldiers. They're won by making better decisions faster than your enemy." She changed the display to show Synthrian fleet positions. "They're machines. They follow patterns. They optimize for efficiency. That's their strength and their weakness. They do what makes logical sense, which means they're predictable once you understand their programming." "The Syntherians adapt," Korshin argued. "They learn from defeats." "They learn slowly," Santos countered. "They need time to analyze and update their systems. If you hit them fast enough, hard enough, in enough places at once, they can't adapt before you've achieved your objectives. You need to stop thinking about territorial defense and start thinking about disruption." Over the next week, Santos and her tactical team presented strategies that made Parliament commanders uncomfortable. Hit-and-run attacks on Synthrian supply lines. Feints to draw their fleets out of position. Sabotage operations against their manufacturing facilities. Accepting casualties in exchange for strategic advantage. "This is too aggressive," a commander from the Pelthian species protested. His people resembled upright bears with silver fur. "We would lose ships. We would lose lives." "You're already losing both," Santos said. Her voice was patient but firm. "The difference is you're losing them defensively, which gains you nothing. Lose them offensively, and you hurt the enemy enough that fewer people die in the long run." "Easy for you to say," the Pelthian snapped. "Humans weren't here watching systems burn for 15 years. Santos leaned forward, and her expression went cold. "No, we were busy surviving extinction. We were busy rebuilding civilization from ashes. We spent 12,000 years clawing our way back to space. We know exactly what loss means. The difference is we learned that sometimes you have to risk everything to save anything." The room fell silent. Finally, Admiral Korshin spoke. Captain Santos, your strategies are sound, but they require a level of coordination and discipline my forces may not possess. We are not trained for this kind of warfare. Then we'll train you, Santos said. Send me your best officers. Give us 2 months. We'll show you what humanity learned about fighting wars you can't afford to lose. Zara attended some of those training sessions. She watched human instructors teach alien commanders about concepts called fire and maneuver, concentration of force, and acceptable risk. The lessons were harsh and practical. Humans didn't sugarcoat the realities of warfare. Your job isn't to survive, a human tactical instructor named Chun told a class of Parliament officers. Your job is to complete the mission. Sometimes those things overlap. Sometimes they don't. You need to know the difference. That's asking us to die, a young officer from the Varelian species said. His people were small and fragile, their bodies covered in iridescent scales. No, Chun replied. That's asking you to understand that some objectives are worth dying for. Protecting civilian evacuations, holding a position so others can retreat, destroying a target that threatens millions. Those are worth the price. Dying because you were too afraid to take risks isn't worth anything. The training was brutal but effective. Parliament forces began operating in smaller, more flexible units. They practiced rapid redeployment. They learned to think like predators instead of defenders. 2 months after the human fleet arrived, the Syntherians launched a major offensive against the Corvus sector. 15 systems under attack simultaneously. It was their standard overwhelming force strategy. Divide the defense, conquer each position separately. Admiral Corson expected to fight desperately and lose slowly. Instead, Captain Santos proposed something radical. We abandon the outer systems, pull everything back to the Nexus station. Let them think they're winning. That's 3 billion civilians in those outer systems, Corson protested. We evacuate them, Santos said. The Syntherians need time to process captured territory before they can convert it to their use. We use that time to hit them where they're weak. Their fleet is spread across 15 systems. Their command ships are exposed. We take a combined force, punch through their lines, and destroy their coordination network. Cut off the head and the body stops functioning. It was insane. It was risky. It violated every principle of defensive warfare. Corson approved it because he was out of better options. The evacuation took 2 weeks. Transports moved millions of civilians to safer systems while the Syntherians methodically claimed abandoned worlds. Their forces spread out, occupying territory, beginning conversion operations. They thought the battle was won. Then the combined human and Parliament fleet struck. They came through a route the Syntherians thought was too dangerous to navigate, a region of unstable space that required precise calculations to traverse. Human pilots made those calculations while flying at speeds that terrified their alien counterparts. The Syntherian command network was based on 3 massive processor ships. Destroy those and their fleet would lose cohesion. But the processor ships were defended by hundreds of smaller vessels and dozens of heavy weapons platforms. Santos led the assault personally. Her ship, the Defiant Dawn, charged straight into the defensive perimeter with 6 human destroyers following. Parliament vessels came behind, providing covering fire. The battle was chaos and violence on a scale Zara had never witnessed Dot, she watched from a command ship safely behind the main action. Explosions bloomed across her view screen. Ships twisted and burned. But through the carnage, she saw something remarkable. The human vessels moved like dancers, never where the Synthrian weapons expected them to be. They covered each other, one ship drawing fire while another struck. They used debris fields for cover. They fired weapons at angles that seemed impossible. How are they doing that? Zara asked the tactical officer beside her. Instinct, the officer replied with something like awe. They're not following programmed tactics. They're reacting to conditions in real time. The Syntherians can't predict them because they're not being predictable. The Defiant Dawn took heavy damage pushing through to the first processor ship. Its shields failed. Armor melted under concentrated fire. But Santos didn't retreat. She brought her crippled vessel alongside the processor ship and fired everything at point-blank range. The processor ship exploded in a blast of energy that caught 3 Synthrian defenders in the shockwave. Asterisk. Captain Santos is abandoning ship, someone reported. Life pods are away. 2 more processor ships remained. Human destroyers targeted them with missiles that moved in spiral patterns, confusing Synthrian point defense. Parliament cruisers provided cover fire, their heavier weapons smashing through enemy shields. The battle lasted 4 hours. When it ended, all 3 processor ships were destroyed. The Synthrian fleet, robbed of coordination, began making independent decisions. They became vulnerable. BEATABLE. The combined fleet destroyed or disabled 70% of the Synthrian attack force. The remaining ships retreated in disorder. It was the first major victory Parliament forces had achieved in years, but the cost was heavy. 8 human ships destroyed. 12 Parliament vessels lost. Thousands of casualties on both sides. Captain Santos survived, but spent 2 weeks in medical recovery from injuries sustained when her ship was destroyed. Zara visited her in the hospital. Santos lay in a bed with machines monitoring her recovery, her body covered in healing regeneration wraps. Despite obvious pain, she smiled when Zara entered. "We won," Santos said simply. Asterisk, asterisk. "At terrible cost," Zara replied. "So many died, fewer than would have died if we'd lost." Santos shifted carefully, wincing. "Ambassador, I know this is hard for your people to understand. You've had peace for so long that you forgot what war actually costs. Every battle has a price. The question isn't whether you pay it. The question is whether the price is worth what you gain. How do you make that calculation?" Zara asked. "How do you decide who lives and who dies?" Santos was quiet for a moment. "You don't. You just make the best decision you can with the information you have. You try to save as many as possible, and you live with the consequences." She looked at Zara with tired eyes. "That's what humanity learned during our rebuilding. That freedom has a price. That survival has a price. That sometimes good people have to do hard things to protect others. We don't enjoy it, Ambassador, but we won't shy away from it either. The victory at Corvus Sector changed the war. Parliament forces began using human tactics across multiple fronts. They stopped waiting to be attacked and started hunting Synthrian positions. They accepted risks that would have been unthinkable before. They won battles that conventional wisdom said they should lose. But not everyone was happy with the changes. 3 months after the battle, the Grand Chamber called a special session to debate humanity's role. Zara attended, dreading what was coming. Chancellor Torvin opened the session with careful words. The assistance Earth has provided has been invaluable. Their tactical knowledge has turned the tide of this war. However, concerns have been raised about the methods being employed. A representative from the Quillian Protectorate stood. His species resembled tall birds with colorful plumage. These humans are turning us into killers. They teach our children to accept death. They normalize violence. This is not who we are. No, said Admiral Corson, rising from his seat. This is who we need to be to survive. The Syntherians don't care about our philosophy. They don't care that we prefer peace. They will destroy us regardless of how we feel about violence. Then perhaps we should negotiate, another representative suggested. Perhaps we should find common ground. There is no common ground, came a new voice. Captain Santos, recovered from her injuries, walked into the chamber. She wasn't supposed to be here, but nobody stopped her. The Syntherians view organic life as a resource to be converted. You can't negotiate with an enemy whose goal is your complete elimination. She walked to the center of the chamber, ignoring protocol. I've read the complaints about human methods, that we're too aggressive, that we take too many risks, that we're changing your peaceful culture into something violent. You're right. We are, because your peaceful culture was being systematically destroyed while you debated. Philosophy. We have the right to maintain our values, the Quillian representative said. Stiffly, you have the right to survive, Santos countered. Everything else is optional. Humans learned that lesson twice. Once when something nearly destroyed us 75,000 years ago. Once when we nearly went extinct 12,000 years ago. Both times we survived because we refused to let our preference for peace stop us from fighting when fighting was necessary. Chancellor Torvin raised his hands for silence. Captain Santos, the Grand Chamber, appreciates Earth's contributions. But we must consider whether the cost of your methods outweighs the benefits. We are asking you to moderate your approach. Santos looked around the chamber at 10,000 representatives from 10,000 worlds. No, she said simply. The word echoed in the vast space. Zara felt her heart stop. Santos had just refused a direct request from the Grand Chamber. No? Torvin's crystalline form flickered with surprise. No, Santos repeated. Humanity came here to help you survive. We're doing that. We're teaching you what works and what doesn't. If you want us to stop, we'll stop. We'll take our fleet and return to Sol. You can go back to fighting defensively and losing slowly. That's your choice. But we will not compromise on tactics that work just because they make you uncomfortable. You cannot dictate terms to this chamber, the Quillian representative said angrily. We're not dictating anything, Santos replied. We're offering assistance as equals, as partners. You can accept that assistance or refuse it. But you don't get to accept our help and then tell us how to fight your war. That's not partnership. That's servitude. And I told you when we arrived that humanity bows to no one. The chamber erupted in arguments. Some supported Santos. Others demanded she be expelled. The debate raged for hours. Finally, Torvin called for a vote. Should humanity be allowed to continue its current tactical approach, or should restrictions be placed on their methods? The vote was painfully close. In the end, by a margin of only 200 votes out of 10,000, the chamber decided to allow human tactics to continue unrestricted. Santos bowed to the chamber, the gesture respectful but not submissive. "Thank you. We will continue doing everything we can to help you survive this war. But remember this vote. Remember that you almost chose philosophy over survival. Because if the Syntherians win, your philosophy dies with you." She left the chamber. Zara followed her out into the corridor. "You took a terrible risk in there. They could have expelled humanity from the Alliance. Then we would have left," Santos said. "Ambassador, I need you to understand something. Humanity values freedom more than we value belonging. We would rather stand alone and free than kneel in a crowd. That's not pride. That's principle. It's what kept us alive through extinction events. It's what rebuilt our civilization twice. And it's not negotiable." Over the following year, the war turned decisively. Human-trained forces pushed the Syntherians back system by system. The machines tried to adapt, but human tactics evolved faster. Every time the Syntherians learned one pattern, humans introduced something new. The final battle came at the Syntherian Central Processing Core, a massive structure at the heart of their territory. Destroying it would cripple their entire network. The assault required everything the Alliance had. Every ship, every resource, every tactical advantage. Captain Santos commanded the operation from a new flagship, the Unbroken Will. Beside her stood Admiral Corshun and commanders from a dozen species. They had learned to work together, combining alien discipline with human creativity. The battle lasted 3 days. The Syntherians defended desperately, throwing every resource at the attacking forces. Ships burned on both sides. Casualties mounted. But the Alliance pressed forward, using every trick humanity had taught them. On the 3rd day, human Marines led a boarding assault on the Central Core itself. Zara watched from the command ship as soldiers fought through automated defenses. Room by room, corridor by corridor, they advanced toward the Core's central processor. The final team included humans and aliens working together. When they reached the processor chamber, they planted demolition charges and evacuated. The explosion that followed could be seen across the system, a bright flash that marked the end of the Syntherian threat. The war was over. The Alliance had won, but victory came with a price. Thousands of ships destroyed, millions of casualties, entire systems reduced to ruins that would take generations to rebuild. 3 weeks later, the Grand Chamber held a ceremony honoring those who had fallen and those who had fought. Representatives from every species attended, filling the ancient hall. At the center of the ceremony stood Earth's contingent, soldiers, and officers who had given everything to save a galaxy that had forgotten them. Chancellor Torvin spoke about sacrifice and cooperation, about different species learning to work together, about the strength found in diversity. Then he turned to Captain Santos, who now wore the rank of Admiral after her promotion for the final victory. "Admiral Santos, on behalf of the Galactic Parliament, I invite humanity to formally take your ancestral seat in this chamber, to join us as full members with all rights and responsibilities that entails." The hall fell silent. Everyone waited for Santos's response. Zara held her breath, Santis stepped forward. She looked around the chamber at the thousands of watching faces. Then she looked up at the gallery where the ancient empty seat waited, dust still covering its surface. "Thank you, Chancellor," she said clearly. "On behalf of humanity, I decline." Shocked murmurs filled the hall. Torvin's crystalline form flickered. "You decline? After everything? After we fought together?" "We fought together as allies," Santos said. "As partners. As equals. That doesn't require humanity to join your government. It doesn't require us to submit to laws we had no part in writing, or accept authority we didn't choose." She gestured to the empty seat. "That seat has been empty for 75,000 years. It stayed empty because the galaxy forgot what humanity represented. It stayed empty because no one remembered that some species refused to bow." She turned back to Torvin. "Let it stay empty. Let it remind you that freedom is more important than unity, that some principles matter more than belonging, that the strongest alliances are between equals who choose to stand together, not subjects who have no choice." Zara felt tears forming in her eyes. She understood now what that empty seat really meant. It wasn't a memorial to a lost species. It was a statement of principle that the galaxy needed to remember. Chancellor Torvin was silent for a long moment. Then his crystalline form brightened with something that might have been respect. "The seat will remain as it is, a reminder that the strongest allies are those who stand free." After the ceremony, Zara found Santis preparing to return to Earth. "You're really leaving?" "For now," Santis said. "We'll maintain embassies. We'll honor our alliance commitments. We'll trade and share knowledge. But humanity needs to go home, Ambassador. We need to remember who we are. We spent too long isolated. We need to find our place in a galaxy that's changed while still holding on to the principles that kept us alive. The galaxy will miss you." Santos smiled. "The galaxy will see us again. Humans don't hide anymore. We just don't kneel either. We'll be here when you need us, as partners and friends, but always as free people making our own choices." As the human fleet prepared to depart, Zara returned to the grand chamber one final time. She stood before the empty seat, its ancient metal still covered in dust, its symbols still unreadable. She didn't clean it. She didn't move it. She left it exactly as it was, a reminder that some things were more valuable than tidiness or tradition. Freedom, dignity, the right to choose your own path. Those things mattered more than any seat in any chamber. No matter how ancient or prestigious, the galaxy had learned that lesson at terrible cost. But they had learned it, and they would remember it because of an empty seat that would never be filled, because humanity bowed to no one, and the galaxy was better for it. Asterisk.